I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to write something like this. You know the ones, the long posts that show up on relationship forums, where someone says, "I don't even know where to start," and then spills their entire life like a glass of red wine on white carpet. But lately, I've been replaying everything that happened, and I keep thinking maybe putting it into words will help me make sense of it. Or maybe I just want anyone, to read this and say, "I get it." My name's Eva. I'm 32, I live in Chicago, and for most of my adult life I believed I was a reasonable, emotionally aware, and loyal person. I thought I understood what love was supposed to look like. I thought I'd found it with Daniel, my boyfriend of almost 8 years, my best friend, the person who knew how I took my coffee and what my silence meant. We met when we were both 24. He was a copywriter at a small ad agency. I was doing freelance photography between waitressing shifts. We were broke, clumsy, and idealistic, and the first time we kissed, it felt like something clicked. We moved in together after 6 months. Too soon, everyone said, but it felt right. The kind of right you can't explain, just feel. Our first apartment was small enough that we could hear each other breathe through the walls, but we loved it. We'd cook late dinners and fall asleep on the couch watching movies we never finished. He'd write ad copy about cleaning products while I edited wedding photos, both of us pretending that what we were doing mattered. I used to believe in that version of us so much that when things started to shift, I ignored it. I told myself it was stress, or growing pains, or just the slow erosion of novelty that every long relationship goes through. But if I'm being honest, and I promised myself I would be, the change wasn't subtle. It started with the silences. Not comfortable ones, but charged. Like something was being said even when nothing was spoken. He started coming home later. Meetings, he'd say. Late campaigns, client revisions, the usual. Sometimes he'd smell faintly different, not bad, just not him. I'd ask him how his day was and he'd shrug it off, scrolling through his phone as if the question was white noise. And I noticed, stupidly, that he started turning his phone face down on the counter. The first time I suspected something, it wasn't because of lipstick on his shirt or a message I found. It was because of how carefully he started being nice. Bringing home flowers on a random Wednesday, asking about my projects. It was like he was trying to refill a cup that had already cracked. For weeks, I told myself I was paranoid, that I was projecting my insecurities, that if I snooped, I'd be the one breaking trust. But when you live with someone long enough, you can feel when their attention is elsewhere, even when they're sitting right next to you. It happened on a rainy Saturday in February. He was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have looked. But the name that flashed across the screen made my heart thud. Maya Work. The parentheses killed me. Work. It was the neatness of it, the quiet, tidy lie that made my hands tremble. The message said, "Last night was, wow, still thinking about it." I remember standing there in our half-dark bedroom, listening to the water run and feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't cry, not right away. I just stared at the message, trying to fit it into a version of reality that still made sense, trying to imagine any innocent explanation, but there wasn't one. When he came out of the shower, I asked him calmly, "Who's Maya?" He froze for half a second, just long enough for the truth to flicker behind his eyes, and then he smiled, that disarming, boyish smile I used to love. "Maya, oh, from work. She's new on the campaign." I remember hearing myself say, "She texted you that last night was wow." The silence that followed was thick and awful. He tried to laugh, to say something clever, but the words collapsed halfway. And in that moment, it was like the air between us shifted forever. We talked, or rather, I demanded, and he deflected for hours. He swore it was nothing. "We were drunk after a client dinner," he said. "It didn't mean anything." He cried. He said he didn't know why he did it, that he was lost, that he still loved me. And I, God help me, wanted to believe him. I wanted to rewind to the versions of us that still felt safe. I didn't leave. I should have, maybe. But I told myself that people make mistakes, that love meant forgiveness, that we could fix it. For a while, it almost looked like we did. We went to therapy. We took trips. He deleted social media to focus on us. But the thing no one tells you about betrayal is that it doesn't just break trust, it rewires it. Even when I wanted to forgive him, my body didn't believe me. Every time his phone buzzed, my stomach turned. Every time he was late, my brain replayed that text like a loop. And then, slowly, something in me started to change. I met someone. His name was Lucas. He was a client, a journalist I'd been hired to photograph for a feature. He was quiet, attentive in a way that didn't feel performative. He noticed things. The way I tucked my hair behind my ear when I was thinking. The way I paused before answering a question, like I was editing my thoughts in real time. We talked about books, about travel, about all the things I'd stopped sharing with Daniel because I'd learned not to expect him to listen. It wasn't supposed to be anything, just a conversation, just attention. But one night, after a long shoot, he walked me to my car and said, "You look like someone who's been trying too hard to hold something together." And I broke. That was the first night I kissed him. It wasn't planned or romantic or cinematic. It was desperate. The kind of kiss that comes from wanting to feel alive again. I wish I could say I ended things with Daniel before anything else happened, but that would be a lie. What started as emotional cheating became physical, and before I knew it, I was living the same double life I once condemned. The worst part was, I understood Daniel in a way I hadn't before. Not that it made it okay, but it made it real. When everything finally came to light, because it always does, Daniel didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just looked at me, hollow and tired, and said, "I guess we're even." That line still haunts me. We broke up quietly, like two people slowly backing out of a burning building. He moved out first. I kept the apartment for a while, then sold most of what we owned and left the city. It's been a year since then. I've learned that healing isn't cinematic. It's mundane. It's grocery lists and solo dinners and therapy sessions where you talk about how you're fine when you're not. It's realizing that forgiveness isn't something you give to the other person. It's something you give yourself over and over until it finally sticks. Sometimes I still think about Daniel. Sometimes I even think about Maya. But mostly, I think about the woman I was before all of it, the one who believed love was supposed to be forever. And maybe that's the real loss. Not him, not even us, but the version of me that didn't yet know how much love can break you. And yet, and this is the part I didn't expect, I don't regret it. Not anymore. Because somewhere in that mess, in the betrayal and guilt and loneliness, I found something like truth. That love isn't about possession. That forgiveness isn't weakness. And that sometimes, to find yourself, you have to lose everything that made sense. After Daniel moved out, the apartment felt too big for one person. The air echoed in ways it never had before, in the clink of a single mug, the sound of my footsteps against the wood floors, the hum of the fridge that I used to tune out. I didn't throw his things away immediately. His favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle, his cologne on the bathroom shelf, the sweatshirt draped over the chair. For weeks, I moved around them like they were landmines, as if touching anything might make the reality more solid. People always talk about heartbreak like it's loud, tears, shouting, dramatic goodbyes. But for me, it was quiet. It was brushing my teeth at night and realizing I didn't need to leave space on the counter. It was checking my phone and realizing no one was waiting for me to come home. Lucas texted me 2 days after Daniel left. He said, "Just checking if you're okay." It was the simplest message, but it cracked something open in me. Because even though I was okay, I didn't know how to say that without unraveling. So I wrote back, trying to be. He called that night. We talked for hours, not about what happened, but about everything else. Books, music, stupid stories from college. He didn't press, and that was the thing that made me want to tell him everything. For a while, I tried to convince myself that whatever was happening with Lucas wasn't serious, that I needed time alone, that I shouldn't repeat the same patterns that broke me. But loneliness has a way of convincing you that connection is healing, even when it's just distraction. Lucas was kind, steady, the kind of person who didn't need to fill silence with words. He'd listen when I talked, really listen, and I found myself telling him things I'd never said out loud. He'd ask questions like, "What do you miss about who you were before him?" And I'd freeze because no one had ever asked me that before. I told him I missed the version of myself that wasn't always scanning for danger, the one who didn't overanalyze every pause in a conversation. The one who believed love was a place to rest, not something you had to defend. We started seeing each other regularly. Dinners that turned into long walks that turned into mornings spent together. It was easy, but also frighteningly easy. And part of me wondered if I was building something new or just hiding inside something soft. Daniel emailed me once, just a short message. "I hope you're doing better. I'm sorry for everything. I'm in therapy now. I don't expect forgiveness." I stared at it for hours before replying. "I hope you're okay too. I'm working on forgiveness, but I think we both deserve to find peace, even if it's not together." I meant it. At least I wanted to. But that night I had a dream that we were back in our old apartment, cooking dinner, laughing. I woke up with tears in my eyes, hating myself for missing someone I couldn't go back to. Lucas never asked about Daniel, and I never offered. He seemed to understand that some parts of me were still under reconstruction. But one night, we were sitting on his couch, and he said quietly, "I can love you where you are, but I can't compete with ghosts." It wasn't an ultimatum, it was just truth. And he was right. I still caught myself comparing, still analyzing what went wrong, still carrying guilt for the ways I'd hurt and been hurt. It wasn't fair to him, and it wasn't fair to me. So I did something I'd never done before. I told him I needed to be alone. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did. He nodded. "Then go find yourself," he said. "I'll still be rooting for you." That broke me in a different way. Because there's a kind of love that doesn't demand, doesn't cling, it just lets you go. After that, I moved. Not far, but far enough. A small one-bedroom near the lake. It had terrible water pressure and creaky floors, but the sunlight in the mornings was beautiful. I painted the walls a pale green, filled the space with plants, and for the first time in years, everything in the apartment was mine. I started taking photos again, not for clients, but for myself. Strangers in cafes, reflections in windows, the way light hit the water at sunset. It felt like remembering a language I'd forgotten. I went to therapy. I stopped checking Daniel's social media. I stopped expecting closure to arrive like a clean ending. Healing, I learned, was less like turning a page and more like rereading the same chapter until you understood why it mattered. There were days I felt strong and independent and whole. And then there were days I'd sit on the floor eating cereal out of the box, wondering if I'd made everything worse. But something shifted one morning. I was out walking along the lake, camera slung over my shoulder, and I saw an older couple holding hands, laughing. They weren't glamorous. They didn't look perfect. But there was this ease between them, a quiet joy that didn't need to prove anything. And for the first time, I didn't feel jealous. I just felt hope. Months later, Lucas reached out. Not romantically, just a message. "I saw one of your photos in that local exhibit. You're really finding your voice." I smiled when I read it, because he was right, I was. Sometimes people come into your life to break you open. Sometimes they come to show you what you're capable of surviving. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they leave you with a softer kind of strength. It's been 2 years since everything fell apart. I still don't know if I believe in forever, but I believe in honesty, in effort, in starting again, even when it's messy. And maybe that's enough. Maybe love isn't about the ones who stay. Maybe it's about the way we learn to stay with ourselves after they go. A year passed, though it didn't feel like time moved in the usual way. Healing didn't happen in clean lines, it looped back on itself, sometimes dragging me to places I thought I'd already escaped. But I stopped fighting it. I started to understand that grief and growth could live side by side. I built a routine that was mine alone. Mornings began with walks to a cafe by the lake, where the barista knew my name and my order. I'd sit by the window with my camera bag beside me, sketching notes for shoots or just people watching. There was something comforting about watching strangers live their ordinary lives. It reminded me that everyone was carrying something unseen. My therapist said I'd become good at noticing beauty again. I didn't correct her, but the truth was, I was just noticing life, the raw, unfiltered kind. I no longer needed everything to be beautiful to be worth looking at. I started taking freelance photography jobs again. Weddings, portraits, small business projects. At first, it was strange capturing other people's joy while still feeling unsure of my own. But it also taught me something, that love still existed, even when mine didn't look the way I imagined. I'd photograph a groom brushing a strand of hair from his bride's face, or an old couple laughing in the background, and it didn't sting anymore. It just felt human. Then one day, while shooting an outdoor engagement session for a couple in their early 30s, I met someone. His name was Aaron. He wasn't the kind of man who filled a room with his presence. He was quiet, reserved, but there was something about him, a steadiness that felt like gravity. He was the brother of the groom, helping carry props and coordinate the shoot. At one point, while I was adjusting the camera settings, I muttered something about the light being too harsh, and he smiled. "You sound like you're arguing with the sun," he said. I laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard from myself in a while. We talked throughout the afternoon, about art, about work, about the weird in-between of growing older and realizing you're not where you thought you'd be. There was no spark in the cliché sense. It was slower, quieter, something that unfolded naturally. When the shoot ended, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I hesitated for a beat, old fear creeping in, the memory of how easily things could blur, break, and undo. But something in his voice told me this wasn't about filling a void. It was about connection, curiosity, so I said yes. Our first coffee lasted 4 hours. We talked about everything from childhood memories to the way people change after heartbreak. He told me he'd been divorced for 3 years. His ex had fallen in love with someone else. He said it with such calm that I almost didn't believe it until I saw the way his eyes flickered when he spoke. He wasn't bitter, just honest. I told him I understood. Not the exact experience, but the kind of betrayal that leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself. He nodded and said, "Yeah, the kind that makes you rebuild yourself from scratch." That line stayed with me, because that's what I'd been doing piece by piece, quietly, without realizing how far I'd come. Aaron and I didn't rush into anything. We saw each other a few times a week, always in small, meaningful ways. Walks, dinners, late-night conversations on park benches. He didn't try to fix me or make promises. He just showed up consistently, and that alone was something I hadn't realized I'd been craving. One night he came over for dinner. I'd made pasta, and halfway through the meal, he looked around my apartment, the plants, the photos, the quiet mess of my life, and said, "You've built something peaceful here." I smiled. It took me a while to get here. He nodded. The good places usually do. That night after he left, I sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. I didn't know where things with Aaron would go, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that uncertainty. Love didn't have to be a destination. Maybe it was just the courage to try again, knowing what it cost last time. Months passed. The relationship grew slowly, like something planted deep in the soil. He met my friends. I met his family. There were small fights about nothing and everything, but they ended with understanding, not silence. Daniel reached out once more. This time, not with an apology, but a kind of closure. "I saw one of your photos online. You look happy, I'm glad." And I realized I was. Not in the blinding, all-consuming way I used to associate with love, but in the steady, grounded way that comes from building peace out of chaos. I didn't reply right away. I thought about everything. The nights I cried on the kitchen floor, the guilt, the anger, the therapy sessions, the loneliness, and all the ways those moments shaped me. Then I wrote back, "Thank you, I hope you are too." And that was it. No grand reconnection, no lingering ache, just two people who had once broken each other and somehow learned how to live beyond it. A few weeks later, I went with Aaron to an art fair. It was crowded, loud, full of color and laughter. At one point, he took my hand and led me toward a booth selling old cameras. "You'd love this," he said, and he was right. I picked up a worn Nikon, the kind my father used to have. I looked through the viewfinder and saw Aaron standing in the soft light, smiling at me. And I realized something I hadn't before, that love doesn't erase what came before. It doesn't overwrite your pain or your past. It just sits beside it patiently until you can hold both at once. That night, I developed the photo I'd taken of him. It wasn't perfect, a little blurry, a little overexposed, but it was real, and that was enough. Years from now, maybe I'll look back on this part of my life and see it as the moment everything quietly aligned. Not because I found the perfect person, but because I finally found the version of myself who didn't need to be saved. The version who believed that even after betrayal, even after loss, love, the right kind, could still find you softly when you least expected it. 5 years later, I turned 34. I woke up to sunlight spilling through the blinds, the city humming quietly outside, and Aaron's hand resting on my waist. It was a small, ordinary morning, but those were the ones I treasured most. The ordinary ones. We lived in a small apartment downtown, not fancy, but full of light and life. Plants crowded the windowsill, books were stacked in uneven piles, and our refrigerator was cluttered with Polaroids from road trips, birthdays, lazy Sunday mornings. It had been a long road to get here, to this kind of calm. There were still moments when the past whispered, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in silence. The memories of Daniel came like flashes. The smell of rain, a song on the radio, the sound of someone laughing a little too softly in another room. It didn't hurt the way it once did, but it still existed somewhere inside me, woven into the fabric of who I was. For a long time, I thought healing meant erasing him completely. Now I understood it was the opposite. Healing meant remembering without breaking. I sat up, pulled on a sweater, and went to the balcony with my coffee. The city stretched beneath me, restless, alive, familiar. I thought about how much I'd changed since that first heartbreak, how many versions of myself had come and gone. There was the girl who loved too recklessly, the woman who loved too cautiously, and the one I was now who simply loved with honesty. Aaron joined me a few minutes later, sleep still in his eyes. He leaned on the railing, looked at me, and smiled. "You're thinking too loud," he said. I laughed. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." He took my coffee, sipped it, grimaced at how strong it was, and handed it back. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. That day, I had a photo shoot scheduled, a maternity session for a young couple. It wasn't lost on me, the symmetry of it all. Years ago, I'd have avoided something like that, afraid it would reopen wounds about what I never had, what I lost. But now it felt like a privilege. To witness beginnings, to frame love in its gentlest, truest form. As I packed my camera gear, Aaron came up behind me, kissed the back of my neck, and whispered, "You make people see themselves differently. You know that, right?" It hit me not as flattery, but as truth. Because that's what I'd learned to do in my art and in my life. To see, to really see. That afternoon, during the shoot, I watched the couple laugh between poses, hands on belly, eyes bright with that new, fragile hope. I adjusted the focus and caught a reflection of myself in the lens for just a moment, calm, centered, alive. It's strange how life circles back. How the same emotions can visit again but feel softer, kinder this time. When I got home, Aaron was cooking dinner, music playing low, the kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and olive oil. He turned, saw me at the doorway, and said, "You look happy." "I am." We ate, talked about our day, shared stories about nothing. Later, when the dishes were done and the city outside had quieted to a low hum, we sat on the couch. I leaned my head on his shoulder, and he traced lazy circles on my arm. It was such a simple moment, but something in me ached, not from sadness, but from the awareness of how fragile and rare this peace was. How hard won. "You ever think about before?" I asked quietly. "Before us?" "Yeah." He was silent for a beat, then said, "Sometimes, but only to remember how far I've come." I smiled, because that was exactly it. The past doesn't disappear. It becomes part of the architecture, invisible but essential. The cracks, the repairs, the way light filters through what's been broken. That night, as I lay awake listening to Aaron's breathing, I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who clung to love out of fear, who mistook chaos for passion, who believed forgiveness meant forgetting. And I wanted to tell her, "You will survive this. You will find yourself again, slowly, painfully, beautifully. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you're not just surviving, you're living. Not in the shadow of what was lost, but in the glow of what remains. Months later, I received an invitation to a gallery opening, a small exhibit showcasing local photographers. One of my portraits had been selected, a candid black and white shot of a couple holding hands in the rain. It wasn't about romance, really. It was about endurance. At the opening, as people moved through the space, someone stopped beside me. It took a moment to recognize him, Daniel. He looked different, older, quieter. There was a small smile on his face, the kind that carried both pride and regret. "This one's yours, isn't it?" he asked, nodding at the photograph. I nodded. "Yeah." "It's beautiful," he said. "You always were good at finding meaning in moments." I thanked him. There was no tension, no bitterness, just a kind of mutual knowing that we had been young and messy and human, and that was enough. He asked how I'd been. I told him about my work, my home, my life. He listened, and I could tell he was genuinely happy for me. When he mentioned he was engaged, I smiled. "That's good," I said. "Really good." When he left, I watched him disappear into the crowd, and I felt nothing heavy, just release. Aaron found me a few minutes later, holding 2 glasses of wine. "Who was that?" "An old story," I said softly. "One that doesn't hurt anymore." He didn't press. He just handed me the glass and said, "Then here's to new ones." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly free. The night ended with laughter, friends, and the quiet certainty that everything, every mistake, every heartbreak, every lonely night, had led me exactly here. Not to perfection, but to peace. And maybe that's what love really is. Not a promise or a rescue, but the quiet choice to stay, to keep showing up again and again, in the middle of all the uncertainty. I walked out of the gallery hand in hand with Aaron, the city lights flickering around us, rain beginning to fall. I tilted my head back, felt the drops on my face, and smiled. Once, I thought heartbreak had ended me. Now I understood. It had remade me.